Sister Bliss is a guest I feel almost needs no introduction. In the 1990s, she and her Faithless bandmates Rollo and Maxi Jazz pioneered a new acid house dance music style mixed with socio-political lyricism that continues to capture an enormous global fan base today. Faithless's songs have charted numerous times at number one. They have toured the world and performed on the biggest stages and in arenas, including 4 feature spots at the world-famous Glastonbury Festival. Over 3 decades, Sister Bliss has written, recorded, produced and released numerous albums for Faithless as well as music for film and TV. What she has achieved in music is inspirational to say the least. Please welcome the gracious Sister Bliss.
The greatest showwoman.
So firstly, thank you so much for coming along to do this, particularly feeling a little bit under the weather. It's an honour to talk to someone who's been a pioneer and at the forefront of electronic and dance music for the best part of 3 decades. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. So I am honoured. Thank you for coming along.
Thank you for having me. Now I feel very old.
Not at all. Not at all. Remember, I'm only a decade behind. So in preparation for today, I've obviously been listening to other podcast interviews that you've done on the Art of Raid, the songwriting podcast, Elevens's with Daniel Perry, and a story that stuck out to me, which I just found so cute and hilarious, was an early memory of you, like one of your earliest memories of music. You said that around 3 or 4 years old, you had this kind of moment or obsession with requesting cheese on toast from, I don't know which parent, and then dancing around the lounge room like mad, listening to Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring, and then you're on this cyclical sort of cheese on toast, the Rite of Spring, cheese on toast.
Yeah.
And I just found
It's
that...
totally true.
I
Makes me
just
sound
found it.
completely insane, but yeah,
Oh my
I was
gosh.
only quite small then, but yeah, I was obsessed with it.
Yeah, well, for one thing, I love, if anyone doesn't know the Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring, it's an album, right? And it's quite a quirky, dramatic, cinematic, like just abstract sort of pieces of music. And I feel like it just gave me this really amazing visual of a little child at that age just nibbling her cheese on toast. But what I wanted to ask you about that, and forgive me if this sounds like a really silly question, but I promise you it's not. It's leading somewhere. Firstly, is that a ritual that you still practice? And do you have some sort of like creative practice ritual that you do or use to kind of get in the headspace of creating music?
Oh no, I don't do the cheese on toast Stravinsky double whammy anymore. I don't really listen to music before I go into the studio. I find I need to go in with a clear head, so I'm not being completely derivative. So I kind of clear my mind. A lot of people sit there and listen to playlists and get themselves in the mood. I find that helps if I'm with other people, but if I'm on my own, the music in my head needs to come out kind of clear of other influence at the time.
Right.
So I tend to not have much of a ritual apart from opening the blinds and letting the sun shine in, actually. And I
Yeah.
say hello to my studio every time I go in because I'm so grateful to have a studio outside my house. And I come to work and it's a different headspace because I've spent years working at home. And for various reasons, I can't live in my house where my studio is. So in order not to be a total pain to the neighbours, I've got a studio here at Tileyard, which has been a real kind of little sanctuary for me.
I bet, yeah.
And that helps me be creative because I'm leaving the domestic behind, because as a woman in music and being, a single parent as well, everything falls to me. And I find myself, if I am at home, it's that extra layer of discipline to not do a bit of hoovering or put the washing on, and get kind of ensnared in a domestic mindset. It's very good to have a separation.
Absolutely, absolutely. I relate to that on so many levels, having had previously when I was in dance, having a studio outside of home. Sort of going back still to those early days, I know it was kind of evident that you had a passion for music from the Stravinsky days, but you mentioned your dad had like synthesizers laying around the house. You also got piano lessons, then you taught yourself the flute and the bass. What I wanted to know is, were you sort of drawn to keys the most? And if you weren't doing music, what would you be doing?
Oh, wow, that's a lot of questions in one. I think I listened very intently. I felt always felt like I was inside music, and I used to shush my friends when they wouldn't listen as intently as me, and they'd be sort of talking over music. I'm not sure why music had that pull to me. What a
I
brat.
just love like the
Yeah,
sort of image of you
shush.
being like,
I still do it. I went to see Jeff Mills do this kind of jazz concert, a kind of homage to Tony Allen and this kind of Afro beats vibe at the Barbican, and these girls were just yelling all the way through, and literally the whole row was shushing and going, "Look, we haven't come to hear you. We've come to hear this." I think
Yeah.
they thought they were going to Printworks, but it was a really esoteric kind of jazz improvised gig. So you really had to kind of concentrate, and there were beautiful textures, and they were just gabbing away over it, and yeah, really disturbed me, really upset me,
bet.
and the whole row. It wasn't just me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I always had this kind of intense connection with music from a very early age, and I think I nagged for about 2 years to play the piano before I was allowed to have lessons. Maybe because my hands would have been too small, but also because my parents said, let's just get her a recorder, because everyone plays recorder at school, and I was in a recorder orchestra, which sounds like some people's idea of hell.
We learned recorder at school too,
You know,
and
it's
I think,
a good starter instrument to get children understanding, you know, notes and, you know, where their fingers should go, and playing in an ensemble and all of that. And I nagged and nagged and nagged, and finally they said, okay, you can have piano lessons. And I was 5. And it's still quite young, but I was...
It is. It's really little.
I knew from the age of 3 that I was very drawn to the piano, but I was drawn to all instruments, to be honest. It's just the lack of sort of time and talent that I didn't get round the whole orchestra. And of course, when I discovered Prince, I thought, well, I just want to be Prince because he plays everything.
Yeah.
So I am a very rubbish, white, female, not Prince. But I do enough to
But
get
awesome
by.
in your own right. Yeah. So that was a big passion. I can relate to that because, you know, I was one of those cliche kids that from as early as I can remember, like 6 or 7, when I began dance, and I was like, I'm going to be a dancer. So I feel like in a similar way, you may have had that approach with music, like you knew from early on, this is something that I'm just so passionate about.
Yeah, but I didn't know it was going to be a career, because I
Yeah.
had my aunt, who sadly died last year. She was an extraordinary musician, a classical musician. She was the flautist, and she was in the Liverpool Philharmonic, and she always said to me, don't do music. You're not in any way dedicated enough.
Really?
But weirdly, when I first heard Acid House, it sort of blew my mind and connected all these dots with electronic music that I'd fallen in love with during the 80s. You know, just growing up listening to the radio, you know, all these bands like Human League and Kraftwerk, they all sounded like they came from the future. And just something within that really spoke to me. So I was dedicated and passionate about Acid House, not, you know, playing concertos and symphonies and stuff. So she was right. I wasn't in any way dedicated or technically good enough to be a classical musician.
Yeah, but
I
it's a different art form.
and I didn't study music. I kind of, I dropped out of uni to make records. It wasn't that I was doing music
That's
at
so
uni
badass.
either. So,
Yeah, I love that.
well,
But your path is
opportunities
different.
presented themselves, and I just kind of went for it. I just had this calling, I suppose.
Yeah. So on that note, what sort of, I'm assuming you're involved in other bands and things before you met Rolo and then subsequently Maxi. What was that time like? And did you have anyone in your life, particularly any other women who were sort of encouraging you and, you know, like helping you to believe that you could be successful in music?
I didn't really record. I recorded on my own. I was in a band at school, but we only like got together to do like one gig. I played the bass guitar for that, and we all wore really short mini dresses and Dr. Martens, which is like lots of people are wearing now.
Was that in the early 90s?
So we all look really cool. I don't think we were a very good band, but that was it. And then I just started recording on my own, and the beauty of having, you know, these new software that you could download, what you call it, a crack copy for free, and sequencers within synthesizers meant you could be a one-person band. You didn't need other people. So I had a drum machine and I had a keyboard, and I met a guy in Camden Market, and he sold me my first Atari, and I taught myself how to program it. It was so sort of intuitive. It was easy. I didn't ever have computer lessons. It just kind of, there was something obvious about it. It was a very rudimentary program. But in fact, as Faithless, when I first met Rollo, he was working on Atari as well, but he had a different program called Notator. I was running something called Cubase, which is like the precursor to Logic. your music came up in a kind of brick form and you would arrange it
Yeah.
in a horizontal fashion. And he used Notator, which went vertically, which was really confusing. But ultimately, I worked on my own, didn't work with anyone else, and I had a demo
Was that
tape
right
on a
up until?
cassette.
Yeah, was that up until you met Rollo, and that was
yeah.
kind of the first
Yeah, I
time
was
you were
making
collaborating?
records before I met him.
Wow, that's awesome.
Just
Yeah.
through people I met in the club scene back in the day.
Yeah.
Offered me studio time because I came in with my cassette was in mono as well. I couldn't work out how to get it in stereo.
Right.
And I was
I love
not a
that.
producer, put it that way.
Yeah.
But they obviously thought there was something going on there. I had a load of tracks. As soon as I
Yeah.
got my head round the Atari, I just made track after track after track.
Wow.
Kind of getting it all out, programming all these little drums into it and playing all the bass lines and all the chords. And that's pretty much what I do now.
Yeah.
They didn't have any vocals on them.
Yeah.
I mean, that was where meeting Rollo and all this kind of amazing happenstance that brought us to Maxi and the beginning, the evolution of Faithless. That was really important. But I wasn't working with singers or vocalists myself before I met Rollo.
Right.
I did meet other people along the way, but generally when I was making all my early kind of Sister Bliss stuff. Actually, the first track I did put out did have a vocalist. Someone found her for me. Must have been the record label. Can't even remember.
Yeah.
She was called Judith and she had an amazing voice. She could do that Minnie Riperton thing. And I always wonder what happened to her because she had a brilliant voice. And I wrote a song for her in a traffic jam while I was trying to get to the studio. And it was like the traffic going into Camden Town where the studio was just like dismal.
Yeah.
I thought, oh my God, what are we going to do in the studio? I've never worked with a singer before. And I just kind of started making little notes in my head. I didn't have iPhones then either. So I kind of wrote a song in the traffic, and that was my first single, but it was under Miss Bliss.
Okay.
I don't know why I didn't use Sister Bliss at the time. Perhaps I was recording a Sister Bliss for another label. I'm not sure. It was the early 90s. It was a very long time ago. But around that time, I was then introduced to Rollo.
Okay.
So I already had my own music out.
So did you have that moniker at first from the beginning? Sister Bliss was
I
sort
did,
of
because I
always
was a DJ. That was my DJ name.
Ah,
So
okay.
I started DJing. I started getting gigs, and I thought my real name's quite hard to pronounce. And also the only female DJs I knew all had really cool kind of prefixes on their names. There was, or suffixes. There was Vicky Red, who used to work in a record shop in Camden. Queen Maxine, Princess Julia, Smoking Joe. So they all had
I
these
love that. Yeah.
cool names. And
Yeah.
so I just thought, well, I need a DJ name. It's like a handle. It's like
Yeah,
or like
totally
a tag
is.
in graffiti.
It is. It's a hook in, right?
Yeah. So that's kind of how that name evolved.
Yeah. So, yeah, just talking about being a woman in the industry and, coming up, particularly at a time when there wasn't much competition. Things have sort of evolved since then. But I just wanted to ask you about this quote that you said in the 11s podcast with Daniel Perry. So you said, I had to work twice as hard to get half the recognition. Now, it's obviously a statement that came from a place of frustration. So can you elaborate a bit more on that, about your experience from a woman's perspective, from a mother's perspective, being in an industry that, with the cliche is to say it's so male-dominated and driven. But do you think things are changing and improving, or do you think it's no different to sort of when you were starting out?
So obviously I wasn't a mum when I started, because I was only in my 20s. It was more that people felt female DJs were more decorative, and people were really surprised that I could technically mix.
Right.
That was something that was of some kind of surprise to people. And that was the thing that I felt really needed to be challenged. Obviously, there were very few female lineups, and then when there were, it was kind of trumpeted in an almost kind of like glamour model sort of energy to it. Like, oh, it's an all-female lineup. Oh, you're going to get to see some boobs. Yeah. Which is really weird. And then there were a lot of people who were really respectful to me as well. It wasn't all negative in any way. But it was more when I found out what DJs were earning and that there was no parity whatsoever. Even by the time I'd made Insomnia and Faithless was beginning to get established and we're having, #1 records all over the world, my fees weren't reflecting that. And I only found that out by accident when I was on a tour in South Africa, I think it was. So that was kind of frustrating. And I had to move agencies because I didn't feel I was being represented properly. And that was hard for me because I was really loyal. I didn't want to leave my agent. I really liked her. She just didn't really have the leverage and the clout to kind of fight for me. And maybe the whole world of DJing and dance music had shifted. It had become this huge global beast. It was aspirational. And it became equated to artists, you know, selling tickets. So it became about bums on seats, really. So DJs started to do new deals, which were about the cut on the door, reflecting that they were the people drawing the talent through the door, not just the night, not just the club. It was almost a co-promotion. So I had to change agencies to feel, you know, that reflection in the times, and also that my sort of worth or my market value, which I always find kind of repulsive in a way. But like I say, it was quite accidental that I found out what my, you know, male DJs were being paid. And I trod the boards as well. It wasn't like I just popped up with a record and like, pay me a fortune. I'd gone round and round the UK. I played the smallest clubs. I'd gone, you know, as a warm-up DJ, and then I became the main event. And, you know, slowly building up a kind of repertoire of different shows, and which became global, started to expand as, you know, people realised they could book DJs from the UK and fly them out here, there and everywhere. So there are all these kind of confluences where air travel became cheaper and so forth. So, and dance music spread, or people had come to the UK, or, you know, particularly, you know, the scene in the UK really developed after many DJs went to New York and they heard what was happening in Paradise Garage or Twilo. They brought that energy back, or to Ibiza, and they brought the Balearic vibe back. Yeah. So then it became this kind of transatlantic conversation.
I love that.
And I think I was very lucky to be included in that conversation. But at the same time, like I said in that interview, I felt I did have to be twice as good. I remembered people standing behind me, like promoters, waiting for me to mess up a mix. You just think, oh, I can do this, you know, have some faith.
Yeah, that's outrageous. Do you think things have changed then?
But that forces you to be better.
Yeah.
It's hard to say because my experience is quite uniquely mine, and it happened in a period of time.
And you're more established, obviously, now.
I feel that there's so much more conversation about the gender imbalance in the lineups, in festivals. There are so many more dance music symposiums now where there are panels all about this, you know, issue of representation. And it's not just about gender lines, it's diversity in all its shapes and forms. Yeah. And that there needs to be more of it. Yeah. Because dance music came from very deprived and oppressed communities, lest we forget. Yeah. It was a very underground movement to start with, and it is incredible that it's a huge amount of profit's been made out of people, and then they're not included in those lineups when they actually are the founders of this movement. Right. So the fact that it's even a conversation is, I see it as very positive. And what can I say? There are tons more female producers, DJs, artists, record label owners, people pulling the strings. Still high up in the record labels, in the majors, it's a pretty male-run industry, but it is changing slowly but surely. Yeah,
which is a positive, exactly, as you say. So I just wanted to ask you, I really love the story of how Insomnia was created, this idea of it just being rushed and everyone was like, oh, I just want to get to the record store and check out some new music. So on that note, have you written any other tracks in that sort of harried fashion, and have they been as impactful, or was Insomnia just a kind of enigma that came out of that particular moment?
I mean, I hope that some of our tracks have been as impactful in that they've sustained us for 30 years. It isn't just one track, it's sort of 7 albums or however many we've done with a great variety of music. We take a lot of care over our music. It wasn't that we didn't take care over Insomnia.
No,
it was
not
just
to
that the riff
insinuate
came
that at all.
quickly, and there was a kind of impatience to it, in that we really did want to go record shopping before it shut, because there was one 10 minutes up the road. It's always good to rest your ears, you know. You go into these sessions, and we used to be there till 3, 4 in the morning. Yeah. So taking little breaks was kind of, you know, really important.
But were any other tracks written like that? Do you remember that you were thinking, oh, it's amazing how we pulled out that track in that short amount of time?
It's hard to say, because certain things come quickly and then they adapt and adapt and adapt over time. So, I mean, by the time we got to the second album and realised that the first album had been successful, and how spectacularly successful Insomnia was at the time, there was a pressure. I felt like, okay, there's an audience now.
Of course, yeah.
And how do we do something but not repeat ourselves? Because after we made Insomnia, there were about, I don't know, 50 records that all copied the exact kind of same structure and the riff sound. So it spawned a load of copycats. So we felt like we can't repeat that now. We've got to move somewhere else. We always want to move forward. I mean, that's always been my kind of relentless push into the future.
Quest.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
All the time. And so God is a DJ was a much harder record to make. We did about 16 different versions of it before we finally felt,
this
yes,
is it.
yes, we found it. It used to have this crazy drum solo right at the beginning, which weirdly we kept for the live show, but it never really stayed on the record in the early versions. And I'd road test it out at various gigs. Then we'd see, is it going off? Is it going off? And you'd just sort of be able to gauge from the crowd and sort of think about it really analytically, like, well, I need 16 bars here, I need to mix that bit a bit better, bass should just drop out here.
Yeah.
You know, so actually being in touch with the club community and being a DJ, I just see it as integral to why Faithless has had, you know, such a powerful connection with the dance floor.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing that you've been a DJ and having that sort of exposing the music before you finalise it to get that sort of reaction from the crowd and gauge like, okay, maybe I'll change this, or like this section worked really well, but maybe it needs to up at this section.
I think it's sort of powerful for the music industry as a whole because you get this kind of affirmation that you're on the right path, whereas when you're developing artists in the music industry, you could be spending tens of thousands and you're not really sure if they connect until they go out and do a little radio tour or whatever it is.
Right.
But we knew that records were connecting in the club world, but for them to cross over onto radio, the sort of conditions had to be right in the radio world, which they weren't when we started, but there was not much dance music on radio at all. And then the whole of the kind of Radio 1 personnel changed. And within that time, they started putting dance music on the radio because they realised that's what the youth is actually listening to. And it's meant to be a youth music station. So that was a huge turnaround, which is why Insomnia took ages to be successful, actually. So we re-released it because it didn't get radio play the first time around. We were told it didn't have a chorus, didn't have a hook, and to go away, which we did. So we just carried on touring around the world, and then the record became more and more of a hit abroad, and then it was unavoidable. And then by then they changed the personnel. So there's all these kind of little moments of luck, but we were in the right place at the right time to capitalise on it. And we had an album. We weren't interested in just doing one-off dance singles anymore because we'd done that for about, 4 years prior to Faithless forming. From sort of 1991 onwards, we were both making dance records. And we met Max in sort of 94 and kind of put our first successful record out in 95.
Yeah.
So we'd felt that it was time. And in Maxi, we had someone who had, lyrical prowess, a real agenda, a beautiful voice, something we wanted to write more around and investigate the storytelling. We were frustrated that dance music was only about one-off singles.
Yeah. He was a very charismatic and poignant performer. So just thinking about sort of how the music industry has changed, but this song that you sort of said has one of the proudest songs, or one of the songs that you're the proudest of is Mass Destruction, which was released in 2004. And in that year, we saw a lot of bombings in Iraq and Russia and Singapore. And this might sound a little bit of a roundabout way to get to a question, but that year we also saw the launch of Facebook, so your first social media platform. So I just wondered, what are your feelings around social media? Because when I was thinking about this question, I thought in some ways social media could be seen as like a weapon of mass mental health destruction, and there's been lots of interviews with the heads of those
weapon
companies.
Of disinformation in the current times. Yeah, I mean, from a very sort of neutral artist perspective, it's a great place, like a window for the shop of you. It's a great way to market yourself.
What a great sentence, a window of the shop of you. I love that.
Well, I mean, Facebook wasn't just built on university students reconnecting. It was driven by creative people, especially artists in the music business, creating Facebook pages. I have to say we were very late adopters. We slightly didn't want to get involved. and missed a big opportunity to harvest more fans. And then obviously they started using algorithms, and you couldn't even connect with your fans unless you paid, which seemed really unfair, because actually we were driving traffic to the platform.
Right.
We, as in artists generally, not just Faithless.
Yeah.
A bit of a double-edged sword. So we're creating value for the platform, and then we're being charged for that privilege where they're making all the profit from it. So it's a tricky one, but what can I say? It's part of everyday life, modern life now. It's a way of us reaching our fans. It's a way of our fans connecting with each other, actually. We had our own website.
And communities.
Our community, the Faithless Forum, was really powerful. People really made friends there. They connected. I would be on it. They didn't necessarily know I was on it, but I was always checking out who was chatting about what they were enjoying, what they didn't like.
Right.
You know, great groups of people would meet up and all hook up in particular cities for our gigs. And some of them would all come backstage afterwards and hang out.
Right.
You know, it was a really special time in the early days. It was, like they say, an online community, but it really was actual people, not just numbers and not just bots, which it kind of became. People would start buying followers, which just seemed anathema to the whole point of the thing.
Right.
So all of our numbers are genuine and organic, and we're not in the millions and millions, but the people that are on there are actually genuine people.
It's more important to have those real
so
engages.
what can I say? It's driven all sorts of ticket sales, album sales, merch sales, and just a sense of connection. Most importantly, when we lost Maxi at the end of last year, the outpouring of love and the expression of absolute, devastating loss from our fans, it was so emotional. It was so important for them to be able to have a place to pay tribute online, because we didn't have a place in the real world, so it had to be in the virtual world. I'm still waiting. I want there to be a massive mural on the wall in Brixton like there is of David Bowie. And I'm still waiting, but weirdly other people, just took their own kind of lead with it, and there were murals in Wales and in Scotland and all over the place. Just incredible, the amount of art that came out of that moment as well. It's people's own creativity paying tribute to Max and everything they loved about him and or the band. So actually the online community, I think, was really, really powerful for people to be able to connect and feel part of expressing their loss, their sorrow, their love, their appreciation.
Absolutely.
And the soundtrack to their lives. It's just incredible. People saying, we're so sorry you've lost Max, and we've lost Max. And, we played our music when we buried my dad or got married to my wife, or I was really ill with cancer. I mean, you can't believe the real stories of people's actual lives, and to be included in the same breath, it's very humbling. And as a musician, what more do you want in life? Any chart position sort of kind of doesn't mean anything, but the fact that you've connected with actual people and they keep coming back and want to listen to you and are quite forgiving when not every single one of your offerings is total genius, that's lots of bands say, our fans are the best in the world. But to be a musician and have fans at all in this very kind of disintegrated world we live in, I think it's just incredible, and I don't take it for granted. Everything is so I can't even think of the word because I'm having a senior moment. There are so many media channels, there are so many bands, there are how many thousands of tracks going up on Spotify. For us as a band, like a Rolling Stone, we did gather some moss along the way, and it was amazing to have those channels that people could, show us that they existed. Because sometimes when you're in a studio and you're making music, you just think, oh God, who's going to like it? Does anybody care anymore? Are we even relevant? Lots of artists, if they've been around a long time, they just think, I should just slink off and go and hide under a stone for a while. That would be the dignified thing to do, but obviously I've got no dignity whatsoever.
Not at all. What are you talking about?
I've still got that compulsive drive to make music, and we did make a Faithless album without Max, which the world didn't know he wasn't well, but that's why he didn't take part on the last album. And it was really, really hard work, but I'm really proud of what we did. And I still think having that kind of conscious, lyrics, agenda, political kind of view and electronic music, there's still very few people who do that, in a convincing way. So I kind of think that's our little corner.
Absolutely.
whether it features Maxi or any other host of collaborators. And it's really amazing
Definitely.
to still have that platform.
It is. And I think it
So,
stands
I'm not
the
ready to
test of
go.
time. No, and you shouldn't be.
Slink
Please
off
keep
under
going.
that stone.
Don't ever stop. So I've just got a few more questions left, but I really wanted to ask you about being a mother in music and just that juggle, particularly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I was looking at your release dates with your Faithless albums, and I feel like there was a little break around the time that your son was born. So I wondered just how you managed, particularly when you're pregnant, because for most women, that first trimester
God,
is
it seems
horrendous.
like a lifetime ago, which it kind of was actually.
Yeah. But then when
it
your
was
child is
bonkers.
little too, before they go to school, I mean,
It
it's
was
a balance.
absolutely mad when I think back. But then there was a lot of flexibility because we weren't tied to a schedule apart from a sleeping and eating schedule. And actually, we did tour as soon as he was 6 months old. We did release an album literally just after I gave birth. The timing was awful for me in terms of having to do press and PR. And we weren't doing things on Zoom. I don't think there was Zoom at the time. So I had to travel when he was very, very newborn. And that was not fun, kind of pumping out breast milk between interviews.
How did you do it? Did he have those
Took a
little
pump.
headphones?
No,
like
there
the
was.
little...
He didn't come with me. There was one occasion where I had to go to, because we had a big fan base in Benelux, which is Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. They call it as a combined territory, Benelux.
Cool.
It's not
That's
a
really
new
cool.
country. Thinking, where's that?
Yeah.
Must get a ticket. And so the sort of typical PR kind of junket thing is you go somewhere and all the interviewers come to you like one after another, and you end up doing the same interview again and again and again. It becomes really bonkers, and I don't know why. Maybe can't remember if Maxie was with me or not. But our album at that point was called To All New Arrivals.
Right.
And we made the album while I was pregnant, but the release date came literally about 3 weeks after my son was born, and that was really, really tricky. Although he did feature in the first single, in the video for it, which was Bombs, which is sadly as relevant literally today as it was when we put it out, about the sort of destruction of war. But at the same time, he was little and he came with me everywhere. But we were also an established band and we had money, so I could pay for a nanny. So I had a nanny on tour with us, looking after him when I was on stage. It was quite restricting as well, because I would sometimes just go to bed and because he was going to bed, and I wasn't kind of out having fun with the band. So sometimes I felt a bit kind of separate from what was going on with them.
Yeah.
And that was tough. But, he learnt to walk on tour. I remember this moment in a hotel in Cologne. I was like, oh, my God, he's just walked across the room.
Wow.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And he was just very happy the whole time. I think this one was very adaptable. I could just take him anywhere. And he just giggled and gurgled and dribbled his way around the world. Doesn't remember any of it, of course.
Yeah.
And then when he got a bit older, he was more conscious of what was going on. And then I think, when did we there was a gap between around 2011 to 2015. So then we toured again in 2015 after we did this kind of greatest hits remix album called 2.0, which was kind of like a reboot of the band. And again, it kind of revived interest in Faithless and made us feel like people were still really excited to see the shows.
Yeah.
By which time he was 10 and went and did the lights and absolutely loved it. Favourite place was the tour bus.
Yeah.
So he came on some of the gigs with me. But by that time he was at school, so he could only come during the summer holidays.
Yeah. What a great life, though.
Lucky boy.
Yeah. I always laugh with my kids when we take them on big adventures that it's the greatest adventure they'll never remember. Like when we've climbed mountains or travelled to other countries, like before they're of an age that they can really remember. So this is a question that I'm asking everyone, and it's a cliche question, but I feel like I have to ask it because I think it's interesting for people to hear. What has been your weirdest or wonderful or worst gig, or all of the above?
Well, they're all different. I think maybe worst gig was definitely playing at the film festival in Cannes, and it was some weird collaboration we'd done with Coca-Cola that we sort of really regretted doing afterwards.
Right.
It was clever in that it wasn't branded, but then actually when we thought about it, we kind of wished we'd said no. It was like, in a long period of work, it was the one thing we didn't feel like massively proud of. But it
Okay.
was sold to us as it was a creative venture, doing an animation and a limited edition Coca-Cola bottle. And it did seem quite exciting at the time.
Yeah.
And also we were I don't think we were on a major label, we were on an independent label at the time as well. Or perhaps that was when we self-funded our own album. So perhaps we were sort of taking offers from interested parties to do creative partnerships.
Right.
Because they offered, to place our music with a completely different audience. Anyway, the Coca-Cola people were hosting a party, and people just were, I don't know where they thought they were putting us, but they put us in this venue. People were just sort of wandering in and out. There was there wasn't an audience. It was like they hadn't promoted it properly.
Oh no.
And I remember Maxie saying, I'm going to take an executive decision. This gig is more boring than watching paint dry. This is the last song at the end.
Oh my gosh.
He actually said that on the mic, and we all
Really?
just burst out laughing. We had to do the
Classic.
show because we had 2 new singers, and so we were kind of breaking them in for a big American tour. So we had to do the gig. The gig was quite important. It was almost like a live rehearsal.
Right.
But anyway, people just looked so utterly disinterested and didn't
it's
really know
terrible.
what they were coming in to see.
Yeah.
But then, that was the exciting bit, was going back to the hotel and the lift doors open and Jean-Claude Van Damme walked out.
Oh wow. You're like,
The highs
"Oh."
and the lows.
Yeah.
And we drove around Cannes in a limousine drinking vodka out of a bottle just to cheer ourselves up at the end of the gig.
Classic. That's
Yeah.
so Rockstar. I love it.
It was.
And what about best gig?
There are so many. But I'd say our first Pyramid stage show was very special. Because we played Glastonbury. It was the first festival I ever went to as a teenager. And so I had a sort of special affinity for that festival
Yeah.
and its kind of leftist ideals. I actually used to be a member of Youth CND, which is a campaign for nuclear disarmament, and my ticket was like 16 quid. That was everything. That was to go on the bus with the other peaceniks, and also that got us entrance into the festival. How mad is that?
I love that though.
Very long time ago. It was like 1987. And so by the time we got to play on the main stage, oh God, what year was it? Was it 2000, I think? We played there 2000 and 2010, both on the Pyramid stage.
Amazing.
And we were second headline to Coldplay. And it was the gig that kind of broke us into the public consciousness. It did feel like there was this wave, this crest, and I think we sort of played our hearts out. It was such a buzz. And I remember John
Amazing.
Peel, the late and very revered DJ from Radio 1, saying, I wasn't sure about Faithless, but that was really something. You know,
Awesome.
and you kind of think, yes, we've turned
Yeah.
him. It was that feeling of going out to battle, that's what festivals are. You're going out to a crowd. It's not necessarily your crowd.
Yeah.
And it felt like every syllable Maxie was absolutely invested in. He
Amazing.
always was. He always gave 110%. But there was this magic as the sun was going down. And luckily that gig's immortalised, and the BBC do sort of drag it out every now and again. So, of course, I wasn't in the crowd. I was on the stage at the time.
Just to touch on the gigs, on the Art of Rave podcast, you mentioned this heavy metal festival that they booed Faithless, but then you were able to turn the crowd around.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that experience a little bit? Because obviously it's pretty damn confronting coming out on stage and people are booing you. But
Yeah,
how
it was
did
really
the gig
intense,
finish?
and it was really very early on. It's a big Finnish festival called Provinza Rock, and it really is rock and metal. And there was proper lead singer covered in blood, probably bit the head off a pigeon like Ozzy Osbourne, in homage to.
Wow.
And as we walked on, they were going, Faithless suck, Faithless suck. And Maxie was like, right. We just played really aggressively, and that was the power of having a live band, is that you can alter the mix. We had guitars, bass, drums, percussion. Obviously, Maxie, he really channeled his kind of inner anarchist, Buddhist punk. And they went bananas. I mean, I had a DAT tape, because we used to tape ourselves to find, ways to improve the show. So I've got the proof somewhere in a dusty box there.
I love that.
We were not appreciated until the end of the show, and then we'd won them over, and that really brought home to us this sort of festival circuit And what I find very troubling at the moment is so many venues being shut down, is bands aren't getting the stepping stones to become a festival artist, because there is a different mentality, and to fill the room when you've been playing, you know, our first gig was 400 people at the Jazz Cafe, to then play to 40,000 people. You have to bring a
bonkers.
different energy. You have to almost, you know, also adapt the music for that space, because a lot of intricacy can be lost, and big PAs, or the wind is blowing. There has to be this sort of extra dynamic to bring people together in a big crowd. And a lot of them are there to see the Red Hot Chili Peppers, or REM, or Lenny Kravitz, or Robbie Williams, or Skunk Anansie. These are loads of people that we've played with, you know, who've definitely got a more rocky edge to them than we have as a dance band. So we learnt to kind of play up the different sides and be adaptable. We also play Montreux Jazz Festival, that's one of the most respected festivals in the world. Absolutely beautiful setting. And many
Did
of
you
the
tone
greats
it
are
down
playing.
for that? Was
Well,
that
there
kind
we
of
could
like
emphasise the jazzier side of what we did.
Yeah.
It's a jazz festival.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, that was a very different energy, because it's an indoor festival, it's not outdoor. So it was something that kind of taught us that Faithless had this flexibility within it, and that we were on the right path, creating dance music, but in a live scenario, and mixing and melding acoustic instruments and electronic instruments. So you kind of didn't know where the join was, rather than it all being programmed, which kind of doesn't allow for that nuance.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. So I probably already know the answer to this question, but it is such a different thing to be on stage performing to obviously writing in the studio. But is there one you slightly prefer than the other? Like, are you all about the performance, or has it changed maybe over time?
I'm still performing as a DJ. I feel it's the trajectory of the music, really. I'm not kind of writing it so nobody hears it. I'm writing it because I want people to hear it. Not just to soothe my ego, but because I'm hoping that I've made something that connects. So playing live is a great forum for playing your own music to people and seeing how it goes down. To me, they're inextricably linked. And there is, of course, adrenaline and affirmation, or lack of, that comes with performing. I think it's something that I've been doing for so long, it's kind of second nature in one way.
Yeah.
I do feel, you know, inspired by the energy of a crowd. I am still very excited when I go to clubs. I'm not so excited about being really exhausted and sometimes having to
late.
stay up really late and then get early flights the next day.
Yeah.
I find that really, really difficult, just kind of like keeping myself not going into a state of total exhaustion. But then again, playing again with a band, that sense of playing with an ensemble and you're playing as one unit, it's such a powerful experience. I suggest everybody tries it, because you all come on stage, you're all from different parts of the world, and you have different worldviews, different belief systems, different genders, different sexualities, but you're sort of creating something of value. I think there is something powerful going on when people come together to make music.
Yeah.
And if you're tight, because you practice properly and rehearsed and you're committed, and hopefully you're playing music that moves people, it's experiential in a way that just listening to the record at home or on headphones. It has this visceral quality, and it makes you feel like the point of all that sweat and blood and tears in the studio. And it is that. Sometimes we write, think it's great, then we think it's just rubbish and tear it all up and start again. There's something in the live performance that is so, that's no other word really, affirming. You think, I was doing the right thing. The tracks, you know, the music works, it flows, it's telling a story. We're doing what we need to do to kind of expand our humanity here.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yeah, there's
And
nothing quite
communicate.
like it as a performer and as a punter, really, in the live music setting. It's a powerful
and it's
thing.
less passive in a way. Not that people listen to music passively. People are often out doing walking the dog, doing the hoovering in the car. But to be in a crowd with live musicians where it can go wrong, they might play the wrong notes, or the track might be too slow, too fast, or you know, there's this sort of more of an element of jeopardy, and it's sensorial because you're bringing a show. We don't just go and play music. There's a light show, there's screens, there's production, there's volume. And there's an edge because when we play live, it's not an exact replica of the record. It's like we remixed our records for the live arena. So you only get that experience there.
Live. Yeah. That's the whole point of buying a ticket to see live, right? I love what you just said, that it's a sensorial experience, because I was just thinking when we were talking just then that a live experience is kind of like the 3D experience of the music, which can feel a bit more 2D because you're just listening in headphones. Or so I love that. Yeah, it's a full sensory experience. All right, 2 more questions. You mentioned a sense of wistfulness and perhaps slight regret around conquering America. So what I wanted to ask in a more simple context was, do you have any regrets?
Yeah, we should have been a massive band in America, but we didn't have management. We were managing ourselves, and we kind of went where we were being offered shows to play 60 to 100,000 people and kind of crawling around America playing college shows. You know, with a big band, it wasn't cost effective. But actually, if we laid the grounds in America and then allowed the synergy to happen, which is when you get a record on the radio, maybe a big sync, maybe a video starts getting really high rotation, or radio stations all across the States pick up on your track, then you really see it. You really see it in album sales. Obviously, the whole world has changed because of streaming. But in terms of having a live platform, I do regret we should have been a big band in America. We were told by Clive Davis, who signed Aretha Franklin and the Eurythmics and Bruce Springsteen and all sorts of other massive artists, you know, you are the Nirvana of house music. Well, we'll take that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then
Clive
obviously
Davis.
didn't quite live up to that promise. But if we played the kind of gigs we played around the rest of the world, and America is an English-speaking nation, we should have really gigged more in America and kind of done the grunt work. But we went after the gigs that were, you know, a done deal, where we knew we'd play to really enormous audiences, and we couldn't be 2 places at once. But actually, if we'd had effective management at the time, I do believe they would have said, look, if you concentrate here, just put aside 2 months to do an American tour. Yes, it will be a loss leader, but you're going to profit with the other gigs and it'll feed back in. But we didn't. We just took the profit.
Final question for you. What is next for Sister Bliss? What does the future hold?
Well, the immediate future, I'm putting out some more Sister Bliss tunes. I put one out earlier this year called Life is a Melody, which I really enjoyed making.
I had to listen to that.
Because I haven't done my own kind of Sister Bliss tunes for a little while. Got some more music coming out. We are in the middle of making a new Faithless album.
Wow.
So that's to come.
Exciting. Yeah.
And I also have a little tour in Australia. I haven't been since 2018. I had offers to go, and then lockdown happened. So it was such a shame not to be able to go back at that time. So it's been a bit of a hiatus.
Yeah.
So really looking forward to that, and I'll be catching up with sort of friends and family on that side of the world, which has been long overdue. So I'm, what can I say? Very grateful to be asked to go back there. So that's a Faithless DJ set.
Yeah, I was having a look because I'm going to be in Melbourne at that time.
No
so
way.
I think I'm going to come. I'm very excited. Okay, well, that wraps up our interview today. And I just wanted to say thank you so much again.
Thank you.
I know.
Sorry that we're both.
Oh my gosh.
On the,
I'm so embarrassed for coughing so much. Seriously.
Like, no, don't worry. You can't be embarrassed. When it comes, it comes. At least we're not at the opera.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. But everyone will be shushing us. Go, what are you doing?
No. And it's also you go in and you feel fine, and then literally just as you can hear a pin
it goes
drop,
quiet.
You're like, oh my god, I've got a cough.
Right.
I've got a cough. What am I going to do?
I can feel that annoying like tickle and like,
everybody glares. Everyone looks around.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much. You've been a pleasure to chat to, and I wish you all the best for the next chapter.
It's exciting.
My
You're going to have to let me know when it's out.
Yeah.
The greatest showwoman.